All right, it just started up on Twitch. And so we also go out on YouTube and a whole bunch of stuff, but most of the viewership comes between Twitch and YouTube. I have a combined chat, so I'll see everything.
Yeah, see, any thoughts on the
Yeah, I've got combined between my Twitch and YouTube and Mixer.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right, I think we're good to go there. So you have any conferences left this year?
No. So the only other one I could have thought of would have been, well, that wouldn't even this year, it'd be next year, would be Code Mash, but of course I wasn't accepted for that one.
Yeah, it's hit or miss for me too. I didn't submit this year because I'm trying to make it a point not to repeat conferences year after year. I kind of want to broaden my horizons a little conference wise, or because the biggest thing that happens is I'll submit to something like Code Mash, and I'll get accepted, or I'll see something else come up, and I'll go, oh, I really want to go to that too, but maybe it's the week after Code Mash, and I like my marriage, so I don't want to be gone for 2 weeks in a row. So there's been a number of conferences I haven't submitted to because they get announced after I've already submitted to something else. So if I just cut out everything I've already been to in the past 2 years, it makes my life a little bit easier submission-wise.
Yeah, and I'm kind of at the same point, which is I just got off the road from a bunch back-to-back, which I didn't necessarily mean to go to. And yeah, so I'm kind of in limbo right now.
Yep. Well, it was nice because I didn't submit to Code Mash. I did submit to NDC London, and I got accepted to NDC London. So it's I get to try a new conference, and I'm not killing myself in January trying to do 2 very large conferences. All righty.
Trying to figure out how to host this darn thing.
You know, they make it hard, don't they?
Yes.
Go into your stream manager.
Oh, I gotta go to the
stream manager. The new stream manager, they have a big old button that's just called host a channel. I've done that myself. It's like, all right, how do I host someone specifically? Oh. All right.
Yeah, I don't have the big button for host. There's host channel. There we go. Added. Host channel. One Kev Griff. Host.
Yep.
There we go.
Cool.
Now, let's see if I can find the slide deck real quick.
If that would be important.
It's in one of 2 places. Yep, that one.
Freestyle Coder is now hosting you. Awesome. So we have a couple folks out in the stream. So if you're out there, say hi. Love to chat with you across Twitch and YouTube. Also up on Facebook and Mixer and Periscope. And my one Periscope viewer is not watching right now. Oh, well.
How dare they?
So a couple of weeks, it was probably a couple of months ago now when we started using Restream. And I added Periscope, and I had one person watching on Periscope. I'm like, who's watching on Periscope? And the guy tweeted me. He's like, I'm the guy watching on Periscope. All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't host this on Mixer too, or I would, but Is anybody talking in your stream?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm trying to see because I don't know if this is going to show up, if the chat's going to show up in my stream dashboard because I'm hosting you or not. I don't think it will.
No, I think if you're hosting, it's still your chat is still your chat.
We'll just pull up a second tab with no. Hey, wow.
Let's see if my. Oh, cool. All right. So I've been experimenting with some bots. So.
Yeah, I had all these weird audio issues and everything getting set up because I'm presenting on this laptop, but I have this whole other computer set up over here doing all the capturing and whatnot, and all the audio and everything sent over there. So it's like, how do I do this on this laptop now?
Let's see. What time we got? We got 5 minutes. Oh, let me send out some Twitter love. I forgot to do that. Let's see. All right.
Yeah, it did not put over on mine. So now we know.
Yeah.
I'm going to go run and grab a bottle of water real quick.
Go for it. All right. All right. Folks out there in Chatland, say hi. I would love to chat with you. We have Chris Gardner with us today. He's going to hang out. He's going to talk about custom NuGet packages.
All right.
All right. Okay.
See, you have more viewers in the pre-show right now than I normally get in my entire stream.
Oh. Well, hopefully some of them jump over and give you a follow. I've had rough luck with followers. Like I've been doing a couple like 2-hour streams and I'll get one follower from each stream. Super jealous of some of these other folks, but they're more consistent. It's like I wish my job paid for me to stream.
Yeah, mine doesn't.
Hours a day.
Mine doesn't pay for me to stream. They just allow me to have a set schedule. So Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 2 Central is my time.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's why I'm rehosting right now because it would be my normal show.
Hey, it's consistent. So, friends out there in the chat, tell us where you're watching from. Let's try to get some interaction from these lurkers. So I did hit a milestone. I hit 150 followers yesterday. So that was my big goal. Wally KC. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm gonna guess Kansas City, one of my favorite cities in the country. Just because I love me some burnt ends, and KC is the place to get them.
I have yet to make it there.
I highly recommend Kansas City Developer Conference.
Oh, yeah, I've applied to it a bunch.
Oh, Wally, you were at KCDC? Awesome. KCDC might be one of the conferences where I break my rule of no repeats, just because I had so much fun there. There's just such a good crowd of people there. So definitely try again, Chris. Try to get in.
Oh yeah, I submit every year. My topics have a tendency to be more fringe, so it gets a little tricky to get picked up sometimes.
So the talk I did, I did 2 talks, but one of the talks I did was on classic text adventure games, and they scheduled me on Friday at 8 a.m. Or 8:30 a.m. And I'm like, there's no way anyone's showing up to this talk. It's the night after the attendee party. It's it's just general bad timing. And I must have had 120 people in that room. And it was like a little itty bitty room, and it was packed, and then people out the door, they opened the door so people could watch from the hallway.
Wow.
So I enjoyed KCDC a lot. It was a lot of fun. So Wally, I think I'm gonna try to get back again this year and eat some barbecue and have some fun. But let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm gonna hit record and kick things off. All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Swift Kick Show. My name's Kevin Griffin. I'm the owner of Swift Kick, a software training and consulting company based out of Southeast Virginia. And today I am joined by Chris Gardner. How are you, Chris?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad we could finally get you scheduled. I know we kind of went back and forth on a couple things.
Yeah.
But eventually the stars aligned and we got you on the show. And we're currently live streaming this to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Mixer, Periscope, you name it. We're probably streaming to it right now. So if you're not joining us live, shame on you. You should be watching us. We'll make sure we put links in show description so you can get back to us in the future. But Chris, let's start off. Let's learn a little bit more about you. So first, we already know your name is Chris, but tell us what do you do for a living? Who you work for?
So I think the official job title is senior software engineer. I work for a company called the Tombras Group. We're an advertising company out of Knoxville, which is not where I live. I am in Huntsville, Alabama, where I have been for many, many years. And I'm trying to see if you're on Mixer right now, and I'll get that one redone too.
I think I'm not under one Kev Griff. I'm under something else. I think I'm under my Xbox Live name. No, I am one Kev Griff because I changed it. All right, so Chris, you're down in Huntsville. You also run a conference down there.
Yes, I do.
Space conference. And that just happened, didn't it?
It was about a month ago. What were the dates this year? October 11th, 12th, somewhere in that ballpark. And yeah, we had a great time as always. Hey, look, I can host you. Haha.
Oh, cool. Oh, MixerBot just kicked in. So yep, now hosting. Cool. So Chris, you tell us what you're doing now. How'd you get started in the software development business? Take us all the way back and tell us your origin story.
So, I mean, the software development business in general, the long story of it is, I grew up all over the place. My dad was in the military, and in 84-ish, living in middle of nowhere, Washington State. My dad got this old TRS model, TRS 80 Model 3 for all you old school people, the one with the cassette tape as the disk drive. And it was a brutally cold winter, and we were stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and here's this new toy to hack on. I was playing this little game and ran out of levels and discovered I could find the code that ran it and started trying to hack in new levels, and it went on from there. And then professionally, I started about 96-ish, a couple of years after high school, and kind of through some nepotism, not going to be afraid to admit that, a really good opportunity fell in my lap, but from there managed to stay through it and progress through since then. So been doing this professionally 23-ish years now.
Wow.
My, how the time flies.
I know. Your beard's not gray enough for it. I've figured after that long you'd have a grayer beard.
It's grayer than you think. So
still a little bit of color shining through. You're almost there.
I'm getting there.
So Chris, outside of tech, do you have any interesting hobbies?
Several. I mean, I'm an avid gamer. So I mean, just picked up this little beauty yesterday.
Oh, nice. So that's a Switch Lite, right?
Yeah, it's a Switch Lite. We've already had a Switch, and it's in the living room. But then we got my daughter Pokemon Go for Christmas or for her birthday last year, and I haven't seen it since.
Yeah.
So, and my 3DS is rapidly running out of games, so I figured it was time to upgrade it for when I travel.
Do you like the Switch Lite?
Well, I haven't really played anything on it yet.
Okay.
I just got it out of the box and charged it yesterday. I got my account moved over. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to run to Best Buy to get an SD card and start downloading stuff. So I like the feel of it, though. In the hand, if you're going to use it as a handheld, I was kind of worried because the Switch is just slightly heavy for extended holding, whereas this one is just light enough. It feels okay in the hand.
So he's 7 now, but when he was 6, my 6-year-old was playing the Switch, and he's a typical 6-year-old boy, likes to multitask. Carried it into the bathroom with him. He's playing on the Switch while he's going, and he drops it in the toilet.
Oh
no! So he comes out. He's like, "Dad, I dropped the Switch." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, it's not a big deal. We can probably fix it." He's like, "No, I dropped it in the toilet." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, could you have put it down for 10 seconds?" And so ended up drying it out. It needed a new, so the digitizer on it still worked, but I had to replace the screen. And the Switch is really easy to take apart, but the problem is the connector for the screen is really fragile, and it doesn't quite clip in securely. So sometimes the screen comes back on, sometimes it doesn't. And so we just leave it docked, connected to the TV the entire time. So I need to pick up another Switch. So I was thinking about the Switch Lite because I need to finish Breath of the Wild still.
I just got the notification because I haven't played it yet, even though I'm a huge Zelda guy and like all my avatars are Zelda and everything.
It's a commitment.
Well, not just as it's a commitment. One, the child stole my Switch, but two, it was like, okay, well, I've got a bunch of other games, so we'll wait till it comes on sale and wait till it comes on sale. And for 2 years, it never went on sale.
Nope.
It's on sale today.
It's worth it. It is a great game.
So
but I probably have 60 hours into it, though.
It's on sale for $42 today. So I'm like, I'm doing it while I can.
Nice.
I've got right at 100 in Super Mario Odyssey.
Okay.
So,
I forgot how far I got in that game. I played it and then I went, okay, I'm done. And I gave it to my son, and my son is the one who will go back to it repeatedly and just go, oh, a couple more stars, or moons. It's like,
I've got all 999 moons. I've got every outfit. I kind of played that game. I appreciate that
commitment. All right, Chris. Well, let's go ahead and turn things over to you. You're going to talk to us about building custom NuGet packages, which I am fascinated with because I've done that several times in my career. I've done talks on it as well. So I'll go ahead and turn things over to you, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So if you're out there in chat land and you have a question for Chris, just drop it in. And when Chris gets to a logical stopping point, I will ask the question on your behalf.
Yep. So we have a few slides we're going to do first, mostly because I'm not passing up this opportunity to share all the otters. And then they'll be really easy to get into those things. So let me get the screen shared. All right. Is this actually still coming through?
Yes. Yep.
Wasn't sure what was going to happen when I hit F5. So yeah, this is the talk I give at conferences a lot, and we have a lot of fun with it by trying to get some user interaction from the audience. So Kevin, you get to be the entire audience.
Okay.
Or else I'm going to do things like call Pi 1.2, which is a running joke in a lot of my talks. Anyways, we talked about this. This is who I am, but we're really here to talk about NuGet. And so what is NuGet? Well, from a high level, it is, do I have a pin from his thing I can use? Yes, annotate. Really, you've got the creator creates a project and he packages it up and he publishes it. This is the same thing as like what goes on with NPN and all that. It just happens to go to either NuGet.org or your little private host. From there, you can look for it and bring it into your own project, right? It's the same type of project management we've seen 100,000 times. But having said that, how does it really work? So let's talk about that part first, because I think when you understand this side, understanding the back end makes a little more sense. So what does it do? Hey, wow, it still left all my little scribbles. Go away, scribbles. Let's see if we can get the scribbles to go away. Clear all drawings. Cool. All right. So what does this thing do? I need to quit playing around with Zoom features. So you search for something over there on NuGet.org, and everything's going great, and you find the perfect package that does exactly what you need it to do. And then you try to go and you try to download it and bring it into it. It's like, yes, I didn't have to spend all this time and money writing something. And then all of a sudden it says, but you can't do that. If you've ever tried to bring anything into Azure Functions, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because Azure Functions has, for version 1, has conflicting JSON.NET requirements. Because of course it does, right? And they're fixed to a specific version. So then you're like, I can't believe this is happening. What are we going to do? And NuGet's like, hey, we told you. We said the required versions. And so you think about it for a moment, and then all of a sudden you say, well, what if I go through and I start manually updating the project, and I have 2 versions, and I can target them individually, and then all you do is you make NuGet mad, and then it doesn't want to do anything, and that's about the size of it. So again, like I said, I had to get all the otters in here. One more otter, except for that's a pupper, so no. Anyways, so we have all that done. So let's talk about the actual creation part. And it actually is very simple. So how do we get these things to work? Magic. Nothing more than simple magic. So really what happens is you create a DLL just like any other you do, and it can have all the dependencies and things you want, and then you create this manifest file, which is called a new spec, and then you push it to a repository. That's really all you're doing on the creator side. The part we have to really concentrate on is this whole creator edit the new spec part. So this is a basic new spec. There is no reason to get worried over all this XML. This is purely the example on the docs.microsoft.com page. But it gives us a second to go into a few things. So we've got this ID, which is a unique ID across whatever your repository is. It does really help if it's a unique ID across everywhere, which isn't as hard to do as it sounds like. But that's where and then your version is very required, because that's where everything does. And most of the things we're going to be looking at has to do with this version right here. You have to attribute it to somebody. There have to be some sort of authors. You need some sort of description. It just doesn't have to be a good one. And then a few other type of pieces of information that we'll talk about later. But that's really all you have to have for this manifest file. And then you also pass it your library, and it wraps it up and makes everything nice. And of course, there are other things you can add to it. You can say, I depend on other NuGet packages by adding a dependencies section. You can say, I need you to put specific files in a specific location. And we may talk about this a little bit depending on how long we're running. And you can also say, I need specific versions of the .NET framework for it to work, and say, don't get these versions off of NuGet.org, but actually use the ones that are installed. So all these are options available to us. So, or instead of worrying about this file, you can just pass in your C# project file, and NuGet does all the magic for you. So having said that, let's actually do some of these things. Anybody shown up in the chat yet?
Nope, it's quiet.
For reference, here are the links, but really if you just search for NuGet, you can find all these with your favorite Google Bings, whatever. The big one is you say new spec file reference. That's how you go straight to that new spec reference. All right. So we normally like to start this in a fun way, and there's one thing I forgot to set up first, so now we're going to have a lot of fun. Don't laugh at me for using IE for this. Need to go to localhost. What is it? 8642. So to do this, typically I knew it was going to do that. Cancel. Wait, I have a link. Haha. All the tricks we're going to show work for just about every repository. That includes NuGet.org. It includes most of the private ones you can have. If you create your own, which isn't as hard to do as it sounds, creating your own NuGet server, you can do that. It also works for Azure Artifacts. There's a slight difference when you do Azure Artifacts and the authentication that we're going to go into here in a second, but it's the same basic principle. Right here, I'm using ProGit, which is a tool from Anito, not a sponsor, that lets us show everything locally in one environment. So we're going to be using this as our NuGet server so we can see what our changes are happening. And you can see I use this thing for all sorts of stuff. So we need that right there, and we're going to log into it and do all that stuff here in a moment. But first, we need a package. We're going to open up Visual Studio. I still have drawings on the screen. And we're going to create a new package. I'm going to say new project. We're going to make a class library with the .NET framework, and we're going to call it swiftkick.lib. Did I get the .lib in there? I did get the .lib in there. And at this point, we've got your standard everyday library. So we need this library to do something, doesn't matter what. So what should we call the library? This is where you have to be the audience, Kevin.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. So what should we call the library?
Puppy dog namer.
Puppy. Oh, let's do a Y. Puppy dog what?
Namer.
Namer. Okay. And of course, inside of this, we need some sort of thing to property or something. So
generate name.
All right. So we're going to create a, let's just say public static string generate name.
It just returns Fido.
Because that's all we're ever going to name a dog.
Yeah, that's
Fido.
the only dog name you need, right?
That's right. So we're going to compile this, and we look down in the corner, and we can see that we have appeased the compiler gods. So everything's working well. So at this point, we have something we can use. But now we have to set up our environment so that we can actually create these packages. So I'm going to pop open terminal, which you had so much fun with yesterday. And well, first thing we have to do is I have Visual Studio set to not save my things. So I have to save it somewhere real quick. All right, now it's actually on the hard drive. We're going to go to my dev folder, and we're going to go to swiftkick.lib. And then since it makes a project, right? One of these days I'll remember not to do that. So here's our project, right? And there's our class we made and all these other good things. So the first thing we need to do actually comes back over here in ProGit, which is we need a place to put these things. Here it's called a feed. So we're going to go to feeds. And we are going to create a new feed. And at some point in time, it's going to ask me to log in. So using all that high-tech security, we use the default account. So we're going to create a new feed. What should we call this feed? How about SK feed? That's good enough for now. And we're going to say this is a third-party NuGet. So now we have a feed, right? And we should be able to push things to it, except we can't. And the reason we can't is because there always has to be some sort of authentication to the server. This is the one weird part you have to set up in advance, which of course I didn't set up in advance, but that's okay. So we're going to go to our settings and say API keys and access logs, and I'm going to generate a new API key. This is going to be for SwiftKick, right? And just because I don't remember which ones are which, we are going to give it access to everything. And we created our key. We're going to copy it. And so the first of the weird commands you need to know is down here. We say NuGet set API key, and we can pass in this key. And then we also need to say source. So what repository is this for? So now that we have that, we can come back to our feed. We're going to add a package. The only reason we want to add a package is because I want this right here, right? That's our source. So that's where we're actually going to do it. And it'll come through and it'll say a bunch of stuff, but the important part is that the API key was saved for that feed. So we're good. So at this point now we can actually create our package. And to do that, again, right now we're going to do the simplest, easiest version. So NuGet pack for package it up, and we just point it to our C# project. So swiftkick.lib.c#. It'll think for a second, do a build, but then it says, okay, we have it. And then we can say, I don't know why I did that, NuGet push swiftkick NuGet package, and our source, if I can spell, is the same one. And it's going to think, and it says your package is pushed. So just that easily, we came through here. This can go away. We can refresh our feed. And there's our library we created. So we created and we pushed it up. It's that easy to get up and running on the most trivial version. But let's look at some of these things real quick. We have this version number. We didn't specify a version, so we'll come back and try to see where it got it from here in a moment. It's got an author, which we never specified. And somewhere around in here, it's got a description of description, which we never specified. So you probably can guess where it got all these things from. But if we come back here, most of these came from Kevin's face being in the way. I'm moving the Zoom widget. Most of these came from our assembly info. So the assembly version is where it got the 1.0.0 from. The description just gets added in as description. If you notice here, I don't have the author set up. I think company is what it uses by default if you don't have it. But the name on my computer for my user, if I come in here, I believe I can just do it here, is I'm logged in as CGuard. So that's where it got the author from by using these default settings. So now using it is just as easy as anything else. The first thing we need to do is create something that uses it. So we're going to add a project to here, which is just a console app. We don't care what it's called. We're going to go to our NuGet package manager. And we're not going to be able to find it right away. The reason being is we have to tell it where to find it. So we have to add the package source. So I can say, give me a new one. This is SwiftKick. And hopefully I think my source is still in there. Yes, there's our feed. So now if we look in SwiftKick and browse, we find our library, which we can pull in. And of course, it had no dependencies, so everything's fine. But now this console app, which we're going to set as the start project here in a second, has that dependency. Open up our program. Did we? Yeah, we did. I'm going to use swiftkick.lib and say console.write line. Well, actually, it's static. Puppy dog namer, which came right up. And generate the name. Give us a console.read key, so it'll stop for a second. And as you can see, when we run it, there's our Fido up there. We successfully consumed our package. And since we're going to be doing a couple things in here, we will, wait, properties. Oh, it is doing huge font. Why didn't I want to do huge font then? I don't know. It's laughing at me. So anyways, we had our Fido. Yay, we did the simple version. All right, any questions so far? Ooh, there's a lot of stuff down there.
Chat's pretty empty. No questions.
Yeah, that's just you talking.
Yep.
Talking to yourself.
That's what I do best.
Yep. It's what we spend all day doing. The benefit of working from home. All right. So that was the very simple version of getting everything done. But now we've got to look at a couple of the gotchas and a couple of the important things people might want to worry about as they're doing this. So let's go back to our actual class. We need to make some sort of change to it. So now let's make it a little bit swanky. We'll add just to have a something that's different. Oh, I'm not using system. Random RND equals new random if RND dot next double greater than 0.5, then return Fido, else return. How about Spot? Spot sound like a good name? So we have a revision. So if we just tried to pack it and push it again from here, so I can come back to my pack, and it'll quite happily repack it for me. But when I push it, if I can find my push, we should get an error. See, it's asking for credentials, which is strange. I think user is just the password too. Right? The remote server indicated the previous request was forbidden. So why do you think it's doing that? So we got an unauthorized, and just to make sure, we're going to push our API key again, right? Make sure nothing strange was going on. Try to push that again. And again, we should get this package already exists. So the reason it does that, and this is very important, and it will drive you crazy the first time you look at it, is that packages in NuGet are immutable, which means once you have placed one up there, you cannot by default put a new version on top of it. You can never reuse the version number. Even if we were to go into the repository back up here, and let's go to our feeds, to our package. Let's say we come right here and I were to completely delete this package. So there are no packages in the feed, right? Even still with that deleted, if I try to repush it, oh, it did allow. It's not supposed to allow you to update the file. I think this is actually a ProGet thing. Hey, wow, it did let me do it. That's not supposed to happen. So what it is supposed to do is force you to create a new version. And to create a new version, literally all we have to do is come into our assembly info, update our version number. Don't even really have to rebuild it, because when we do the pack, it should do the build. So it did the build for us. And so now if we push it, where's my push? Oop. Helps if we push the right one. Oh, because we packed. Ooh, weird things are happening. You created one point. I never. Yeah, I saved this file. Fine, I will rebuild it first. There we go. 1.0.1. See, it's important you see the pain I go through too, or else you wouldn't believe we're really doing stuff. Now go to 1. And now we have 1. And as you would imagine, we can go back to our NuGet package manager, and you'll see already there's an update. So we're on 1.0.0. We can go to 1.0.1. So let's update it. Excuse me. Come back to our program. And we're just going to simple enough for each int I in 1 to 10. Oh, I'm not on C#8 yet. Okay. Emerald range 1 to 10. So we're just going to write 10 out so that we can see what's going on. And we always got Fido. Well, that's no good. Was there a bug? Or did we just get really lucky? Oh, now they're all spots down. Okay. Oh, I know what the problem is. I bet it's compiler optimization. This is static. So even though there's a random, it's probably generating the first one and then retaining the value. C# tries to be helpful sometimes. All right. Any other questions so far? Looks like the chat is just me asking if I've ever done it before.
It's yeah, about 20 just lurkers.
So when we were talking earlier, and I kind of skipped over it during the slideshow, I work for an advertising company, so we write the same site like 20 times a year. So we definitely created packages with common tools we used to do this, which is how I really deep dived into it. But let's get into a couple other of the weird things. And we're just going to leave that. I don't care if it's random or not. But we do need a third revision. So what else should we do to this thing? Do I feel like trying to fix this right here?
I wonder if your bug is because I actually think on line 6 you're reseeding every time, and it just happens to.
Oh, we're doing it so fast.
Yeah. If I had to guess, that's what I think might be happening.
That's probably what it is we're generating them so fast that the clock isn't reseeding differently.
Yeah.
Oh, it's easy enough to fix. This can be our bug fix. So we're going to make a private static. So what version? So here's where we want to start doing strange things, though. So we're going to come over to our assembly info. We're going to create version 2, right? And if we build this, it built it. I just hit the wrong button. We are correct. But let's now, if you wanted to actually do all these things by hand, you can come here and say NuGet spec in a folder that has a C# proj, and it will find it and it will create the new spec file for you. So you don't have to write down all the boilerplate. And typically at this point, I'll just come here and say add existing file. Say show me everything and find our new spec. Because it's just XML, so we can get our nice pretty coloring here. So as you see right now, there are some tokens here. We have our ID, which it automatically generates for us. And it automatically generates the ID basically based off the assembly name. But I believe if we come here, it uses the assembly title for that. We also have the version. We said that was getting it from the assembly version. The title is definitely getting it from the title. That is a one-to-one translation. The authors, I believe if you come in here, it will use company, but I think if we give it one, I think assembly author is a, no, it is not. There is an assembly something that will use it. But I believe it's grabbing author. So we will verify this here in a second by saying author. These are just niceties. Like I said, there are other things. You can point to your license if you're using MIT or GPL or anything like that. If you have a web page for the project, you can point to it. If you want the icon that shows up in the NuGet package manager, so that thing, to look different, you can specify where it can find it. Whether or not you have to say you agree to the licensing before you get it. The description is just your assembly description, which I know is right here. And then release notes, you can put in whatever you want, or you can, point to any of these other things. Copyright's automatic, but you can also point to the assembly copyright. And then there are tags, so you can look things up by tags. So those are the standard things. So the first thing we want to do is, I like to have fun with this one. Well, let's do one of these with this, because this is going to be interesting. Let's build this so that everything's built in our name thing. We're going to come back to our command line. And we created that new spec file. Everything's good. So let's just pack based on that new spec file. And you see it saying parameter vol empty string, parameter cannot be a null value. And you're probably wondering why. Well, the first issue is these only work if you're doing a Visual Studio, or if you're doing it based on the C# project. The weird thing that goes on is you can bring in your C# project and point it to that. If there isn't a new spec file, it creates this default one, except for leaving out the parts with blatantly default data and stuff. It creates this file for you, looks for these values inside your project file, and then removes the file when it's done. However, if you already have the file, it uses what's in the file. So without changing anything right there, we can actually come back here and say pack based on our C# proj, and it will work. And we now generated, description is required. As you can see, it's now pulling values. Because we have to have a hello world somewhere, right? So rebuild this thing, come back in here. Now everything's happy. It's complaining about some of these default values, but we did create our version 1.0.2. So we should be able to push this now. I'm going to find me a push command. We've pushed our 2. We can come back to our NuGet package manager. It finds the update. So hopefully now we have fixed our bug, right? If we run the solution, we now have Fidos and spots. 1, 2, 3, more spots than Fidos. I was wondering if there would be an equal distribution. So all that's good. Well, the final question on the easy things we may want to know is what happens if there's a conflict between the two? And hopefully you can figure this out. It's not too hard to figure out. But when we're building this thing, we're packing it based on the project. So let's come in here and say our project is on version 4. But we're going to come into our new spec and change it to 1.0.3. Give it a hard-coded value. If we build and pack this, which one do you think is going to come back? This is normally where I'd wait for the audience to answer, but of course we have a chat room now. So let's pack it based on our C# proj. But it still took from what was in the NuGet spec file, because the NuGet spec file always wins no matter what. So again, this is when we stop and look at these 17 people. Hi, 17 people. Go follow my Twitch channel too, and say, do you have any questions? Because this is the most of the easy parts. And if we want to get some specifics on some of the more basics, we can.
Yeah.
But normally when I'm given this type of talk, I then go with a, hey, here's something really cool demo, and I wanted to wait a second before I pulled that one out. Were you there?
We have about a 5-second delay, so we'll.
Yeah.
Wait a second, chat. If there's something you'd like to see, let us know.
Were you at an EdoCon when we basically created this demo I'm about to do next?
I was at an EdoCon. I wasn't in the talk. I only sat in my talk.
Yeah.
that weekend.
I sat in the back of the room for your talk while I was working, but I understand completely. What this demo we did was Alex trying to goat me to do something. And so it's something Alex kind of goaded me into doing.
Yeah.
Wally said, I've only ever got this far, never hosted a NuGet. So yeah, once you get the packages created, it's the same way but different. That when I came into here and created a API key, everything would be the same if you wanted to host it somewhere, barring one difference that we'll talk about in a second. Excuse me. If you go to NuGet.org, if you want to make it public, you can sign in and create an account. And then after you create the account, you can get an API key for you to push to NuGet.org. So that's there. The only weird part is if you are using, what is the name of that thing? If you're using Azure Artifacts, you have to specifically be using version 4 or above of NuGet.exe. But if you are doing that, it actually uses a AD, who's logged into the computer type of Microsoft account authentication in the background. You have to pass it an API key. It doesn't matter what the value is, but NuGet.exe will grab the logged in user and send that as a Microsoft authentication to make sure you have rights to the repository. That's the only weird thing. But it's just pushing it up just like that. If there are no other questions, let us go ahead and look at the really nifty demo. We don't need this for a moment. We don't need this. All right. So let's look at the evil you can have doing these things. We're going to pull open this project. Should be in recents. Yep. Called NuGet.solution. And if a bunch of files are open, we're going to close them right away. All right, close all documents. So we have this test app that isn't really doing anything at this moment. We come to our program. All it's going to do is we created this static property called find me, which returns the value find me. And then that's going to write to the screen and then wait for us to do something. And if we run this right now, it'll do exactly what we think. The reason I'm not doing it now is because of these other parts. So what we have up here is this NuGet package I've created. And there's some weird things in this one. So let's first look at our new spec, because we're going to use this files part. And in this files part, we have these weird parts where if you look, I'm actually putting the DLL specifically in the content folder. And you can see that I've got it sitting right there. We'll get to why we're doing that here in a moment, but we're installing it to a specific location. And then we're taking this file called fancystuff.targets, because this is where I do all the fancy stuff. And we're putting it into the build folder. Now, the build folder is not anywhere in the project. So if I go to test app the test app folder, and we can show this by coming here and saying, let's just add, not manage. We can come here and say add existing item. Let it think for a second. So if we look at all files, we will see where that DLL is, but you see that fancy stuff what did I say it was called? Fancy stuff.targets is not anywhere in this folder. It actually put it in one of the Visual Studio folders of all weird things. It might be, if I go back to the project packages, it may be in here. Nope. Yeah, oh, there's the build. It put it there. So you can find it, but that's where it dropped that file. But that file is what we're going to talk about here in a moment. So the reason it's doing that is by saying that it is a build thing. What it also does is it creates hooks inside the project, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So we have two classes in this thing. Here's our targets file we are talking about, which we'll open right now. But then we have this class one and this takeback. What this targets file does is it creates compiler steps. So we're creating a NuGet package that creates compiler steps. So we create two new compiler tasks, one called fancy things, one called takeback. And we say they're both stored inside of fancystuff.dll. And if you notice, we're using the project dir, which is one of the reasons why I said drop it in the content and it's in the project. It doesn't have to be in the project, but it has to be in that folder because I have to know where to find it. So that's the only reason it's there. I then say this build depends on, so when you perform a build, you're going to do the fancy stuffs task. You're going to do whatever the parent build depends on was, and then you're going to do this takeback target. And for these targets, we have our fancy stuff, which, as you see with our label, it says it's doing something. And it's going to call a method called fancy stuff on this source file. And then for takeback, it's going to do the same thing. So let's look at what those actually do. Inside class one, it gets passed in a source file. When it executes, it looks for the source file. It reads all the lines of code. It finds a line that says find me. And if it finds it, it resets it to say found you. And then it writes the file back out. Now you'll notice we're doing this before we do any of the standard compile stuff. It then compiles everything like normally. It comes into takeback, looks for the source file, finds the line that says found you, and if it finds it, turns it back to find me. So why would we do such a thing? Well, let's look at this, and the package is already installed. So we can build this thing, and when we build it, you're going to notice it said, hey, this file changed. Do you want to reload it? And we can say yes, but nothing happened. But we built it, and the build succeeded. So when we run the application, it's going to come back in here, and notice it says found you instead of find me, because this NuGet package I installed changed the code, compiled it, then changed it back. And if you do not have this open, so let's come right here. We'll do a build, rebuild all. We're going to rebuild the solution. So notice here we got no errors or pop-ups. And if we run it without any warning, we got our code changed. And the original reason I came up with the demo, which is why it was called fancy stuff and the takeback wasn't there, was I was actually creating a NuGet package I could install on some of my projects because I was forgetting to update the version numbers. So it would go through, it would find the assembly info, look for the assembly version attribute, and increment the version number, the last part of the version number on release builds. So that if I forgot, it would still at least get incremented. And then as I was demoing this, somebody went, well, what's to stop you from then moving it back? Which is when we created the proof of concept that it then puts the code back to the original state, which means you could have this running on something that, let's say you were trying to mess up somebody's scientific things, and we joked about changing pi to 1.2. Well, what if you found someplace where 3.14 was hard-coded and you change its value to 3.2 and then put it back in some file nobody ever looks in? And it was really a warning that, hey, you can do some really dangerous things with these packages, and if you're not sure exactly what they do, maybe it does, pay to look at the source code or go see what's in that package after you've installed it to make sure there's not something really weird laying around. And so that's generally where I end this talk. If we have any other questions, I see Wally still piping up with some stuff, and I made him cry with my little demo. But what else? What other questions do all y'all have?
So far, just Wally. We'll give everyone a second. If not, that's a good place to wrap up.
I don't see anybody saying anything, but I can only see one chat room.
Yeah. Well, it's same across all the chat rooms, so
okay,
no big deal. All right. Well, we can go ahead and wrap things up there. It's not a problem.
Right. Let's stop that part of the share so we can get back to faces.
I'll turn my video back on. All right, folks. Well, Chris, again, thanks so much for hanging out with us today, teaching us about creating custom NuGet packages. Thanks to those who joined us live on the stream, and thanks to anyone who watches this in the future. Until next time, thanks so much for watching the SwiftKick Show. Take care.
Bye.